Okay, welcome everybody this morning. Another thing I would like to discuss is what will actually change in music industry due to AI. Apart from the media composer, would like to come back more in detail about the specific consequences for media composers. What kind of things will change in the music and the media industry in general? Maybe Mathies, you can say something about it because you're also a
Yeah,
lot involved with video stuff, etc., and music and video. So, what's your idea about that?
yeah, I see a lot of developments also in the video AI. Generating videos got a lot better last year, actually. So we saw OpenAI. They dropped Sora. They announced it a year ago, actually, and now it is available a few weeks ago. We saw other parties that are jumping in, like Runway and Pika and some Chinese models, Kling AI, and those are all video companies. It begins with like a moving image, a little bit like this, so a little bit movement, and then we see more movements and better physics, like how the real world is working, and that you can prompt better, and it's really interesting to follow because it's really goes really fast, the developments. I don't think it will replace Hollywood or something, but I see a lot of opportunities and changes in if you do like visual effects, or you can just extend a shot. Those are really practical, handy stuff if you are an editor and the shot is too short and you can just put 3 seconds and extend it. It's really nice to have those kind of tools as an editor, for example. So those tools are really useful for the industry. So people who are already working, making films and making music, those creators who love to create, they get these tools, and it's really, really handy. And I see also a new world of AI videos coming, that people who know nothing about video, but they like to create and they have some ideas, they can create a whole video clip in one day. It's really interesting to see how more people get creative. If you have ideas, then you can make something. Yeah, and I see a lot of sort of new culture, a new way of making for music, and it's also for video. It's hard to say how the industry will evolve. It's a too big question, I think, actually. But I teach some students, and I give them information about how can we use AI, what tools are there if you are a graphic designer or a video editor or musician. And it's really nice to see what people make with it. If I give them an assignment to make a video clip, they got really creative and use those tools in ways that I did not expect. It's really cool to see how new creators are using those tools. We know how to make music in the old way, but new people don't know that. They use those tools, they click on a button, they write a prompt, and there comes music out of the box. Well, that's another question. Like, when are you a creator of something? When we call ourselves the creator of something, that line is moving, and that's interesting for all creators, I think.
Well, I think all people here have been studying and working and getting experience as a composer or whatever, as a visual editor. But you're talking about people who are maybe in the beginning more consumers and they are starting to become creators. So is it become more vague, the border between the consumer and the creator?
Yeah, I think it is. You can generate a whole orchestral composition, but you don't know anything about notes and instruments and stuff. So yeah, it's really democratized. I don't know if it's a word, but yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it helps if we were talking about what direction will it take the development to just follow the money. And this leads back maybe to something that Janne said earlier when we were discussing rights. She said, okay, there's a business model here. I don't always see it with AI. So say if you were an investor and you had a lot of money and you thought, okay, I'm going to put this in AI, why would you want to put it in AI for music? What is the business model? What because right now people are afraid of missing the boat, so investing a lot of money in it anyway. But long term, anyone any ideas about how this will actually make money for people?
I can imagine that you address a market which hasn't been addressed until now, which is more or less Machielse describing people or who have ideas who haven't been able to create music or visuals until now because it was too complicated. You had to study.
Yeah, that's a big market. Yeah.
And which raises the question, of course, will there still be a difference between what we, for example, create as trained professionals, as we call ourselves? Will you notice a difference between what is created through AI and what we create?
I think that's kind of it, right? If you really want to answer this in a business, like if it's like a sort of a business answer, it's simply like giving people the feeling that they're pro musicians, right? Like giving them the feeling that they have accelerated in their talents or like making music, in a very quick and swift way. I think personally, like if I look at, for example, Splice, I think it's a really great business that's thrived in the past 10 years of electronic music production. And if you just look at their paid users who are so loyal to that platform, and also the creators that supply like the sound packs and the samples and even like the MIDI packs and everything, it's a really nice ecosystem that they've kind of created for EDM production. And I think companies like Suno or Udio are, trying to crack open a new kind of market there, a new niche of prosumers or like consumers that just want to create some music and are willing to pay a little bit for that every month. And I think it's just the law of having a large user base. And I think Suno has understood that law pretty well early on. So they built a very strong community like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago when they started. So if you look at their Discord, there's like thousands and thousands, like tens of thousands of people just on that Discord alone. And I think building those communities who are willing to, subscribe and be loyal to that platform is for them the key to that business model. Sort of a footnote there is that, the second place or the third place like Udio or any other startup that will challenge their position will have a much harder time in a business kind of way. It's having that law of big numbers, having a large user base to support the development of AI, because it is expensive. So it requires a lot of users to subscribe to your service. And probably there's not much room in music for 5 or 10 of those companies. It will probably be 1 or 2 that are leading that. I think that's where the money is, if you want to answer it in that way. So I do see that. I do see that there's money there.
But it also sounds like a new business.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the sense of that's not necessarily taking away from the existing music economic culture.
Yes, it's creating a new value for new people. And I think that's why it was clear for these investors to also invest heavily in this technology, because there was a new market to be found. And I think they opened that market, like 2 years ago or a year ago. Yeah.
They're really investing also in like challenges and competitions, writing out for those communities to play and to share each other's tracks, like it. And I see a lot of things happening there.
Yeah, strong community building, like the summer of Suno. Like I think there was like $1 million in prizes of competitions, basically, which is kind of unheard of, right? Like if we have a competition here in the Netherlands, I think I participated once in one of those, and it's such a sweet like ceremony. And then there's now in 2024, there's like a summer of Suno where some people can earn up to like $100,000 for an AI track. So that's kind of like what the hell is going on, right? It's community building. It's basically providing for that law of the big user base. Because I guess that's also maybe the business model that will work right now for them. Because I mean, their business model is based on free music, right? Like having a free data catalog. It might be very temporary, right? Like we said it earlier. So I don't think that business model is particularly like has a longevity like component. But there's new ones like having partnerships with brands and artists. That is very interesting too. It's a new market basically. It's definitely something new.
And also partly a search for a new market, right? That's also why some of the competitions are there, and that all these services are at least partly free and also not very expensive.
Right.
So on top of like existing models, and because there's also a lot of music being generated. So even in the time that Aiva came up, like more like symbolic music generation, let's say another competitor. But together with the Udio and Suno generated music, this is also being released. So let's say, for instance, the publishing platforms, but also a company like Spotify is kind of also wondering like, okay, how to deal with all these new tracks being submitted here.
Yeah.
Kind of overwhelming also the amount of new music. For like more the media composers, there's the traditional model as well, but then for instance the temp music is now being generated. So filmmakers get acquainted with the AI generated music, so instead of having to repeat or make something similar to Hans Zimmer, John Williams, which the filmmaker liked, it's now an AI track that you can try to emulate.
Yeah, I think those there are a lot of there's a lot of music that we don't listen to actually. Music that are under the videos or that we listen to while we are studying, like lo-fi beats. Yeah, it's all like it's not music that we pay attention to, that we
lean back music.
It's just like consuming music, and I think those tracks, they can be generated by AI or with AI easily. And I think that when there was a market for making stock music as a composer, but I think that market is gone.
There was an article last week by an investigative journalist, Liz Pelly, and she dived into the rumors that have been existing for a long time that Spotify is using like fake artists or fake music on playlists. And she discovered, yes, this is happening. So there are music production companies making music, licensing it to Spotify on, like, let's say, cheaper terms than the regular royalty deal. And then this music is also actively pushed by Spotify curators. And this is on these like studying music playlists, background music playlists and so forth. But also some of these production companies actively encourage the use of generative AI to create music. So that's one thing that sort of eats from the royalties that would go to the traditional human creators.
I also read about it. Yeah, I heard about it. So that's one of the consequences anyway for, we might say, that the traditional media composers, that one of the possible source of income would be creating, composing source music, library music. That's probably going to disappear or is already disappearing.
Yeah, and a little bit fast forward, like what Janne mentioned, these more like neural codecs. So if you would consider AI as a kind of a compression algorithm, so in some context you can consider it that way. So for instance, there have been these examples of motion capture, for instance, where you train an AI on what could be next movements, and so to make motion capture fluid. If you then have that into a small efficient model, then it's not very far to implement that in a video game, for instance, so that your characters move very smoothly. So Google released that not so long ago, where the images of a video game are being generated. So you have like game footage, which is generated as video, real time. So now you still need like quite a big cluster of computers to render that. But imagine having that possibility with generative AI, so the video being generated, but why not then the audio and music as well? We go a little bit back to the early research into the adaptive music systems, which Rens is very familiar with. So narrowed down to, like, let's say, a certain idiom, like certain style of generative music, for instance, which fits the specific game. So then it's not then algorithmic music anymore. It's not these large language models, but more compacted versions. So if I understood it right, Janne, this would be like one of these codec approaches, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. It's all about compression, really. In the end, compression is sometimes referred to as a component of intelligence. Basically, it's a weird analogy, but it's interesting.
Do you see any more consequences for what you might call, as I said already, the traditional media composer, apart from tools that pop up in DAWs and also plugin software that we already have? So library music will disappear, probably.
Right.
Any more consequences for this particular field of media composition?
Well, I imagine that for new media composers, there's this challenge of motivation. There's studies now also popping out, for instance, on creativity, what this leads to in other senses. These studies show that, yes, the output is more creative. So with these collaborations, human AI creativity, but in a whole, the output is more similar, let's say. So you get you kind of recognize which AI is being used. So the signature of the creative generative AI is limiting the output. I think we all might recognize that let's say the specific genres in audio, for instance, if you create a lot of that, there's done some overlap. And so this compression we talked about also means you get a narrowing of the amount of creativity. And this, of course, then also adds on the lack of feeding your own creativity. So learning how to create and having the challenges of writer's block, or how to move to a new motive or make a variation, or hard work of a good orchestration, etc. If you don't train that yourself, you might also lose some of these skills. And we see that, or think we see that in our students, and let's say year one students that learn on the system basics, so the basics of programming, they're now often assisted with, for instance, ChatGPT in learning how to code. But they don't learn how to code with these AI assistants. So the output is that the goal of what this studying is for is not help with this kind of Gen AI. At Music and Technology, we're exploring also, same as the prohibition of social media, for instance, in class. You don't need that for your learning in class. If certain Gen AIs can be prohibited, for instance, in year one or certain classes, if it helps the students.
But is it also just a thought that you might need a new training, being creative in writing prompts, learning to be creative with using the language? Is it also the case? I can imagine it's a whole new approach to a new way of thinking.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit unnatural for a composer to write down in text how his music would sound. So it's a little bit weird approach to get to music from a composer's point of view. But there are a lot of other possibilities to use AI. For example, if you just hum a melody, for example, and give that to a saxophone or another instrument. Or I saw last week release from Adobe, they're working on a system that you can mimic sound with your voice. And then if you mimic a dragon, or for post-production sound design in films, you can use your voice to set a certain bass. You can add prompts, and then you combine your own human input with text, and then AI is working it out. So yeah, there are a lot of possibilities to keep your human touch.
Yeah, but I think we should be aware that we are influenced by the tools we use and make a conscious decision about that. And I feel that a lot of the tools that are being presented to us have this idea of being more efficient than the previous process. But creating music usually isn't about saving time. It's about like spending time in a way you like, and you also need the time to develop. And I prepared this. There was one company sending me an email, and they offer a service with rendering AI vocals online. So I got this email, and it said, "Imagine composing a masterpiece with rich studio quality vocals, all without booking a single recording session." Well, I have no trouble imagining that, but it seems boring as hell. Like the recording sessions are sometimes the best part. So that this is not saying that there can't be AI tools that are helpful or that help your creativity or that you can cooperate with, but not all of them are. That's basically my point.
Yeah, if
No.
I may add to that, so limiting this part of creativity, especially if as we're talking about music, so kind of different from image, there's a lot of unspoken words. So if it would be easy to limit your ID to just a semantic cloud, it would also be very easy to work together with filmmakers like, oh, you're meaning this, and you can actually then transform this semantic ID to music. This world of feeling, emotions, that's not always easy to translate into just a couple of words. You can, to my idea, really reduce it to promptology. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting, I think, because I had just an example at the studio where Machielse was also referring to already. We have now, I forgot to name the plugin that you can create footsteps using your voice by simply making footstep-like noises, which can add a certain character, and then the plugin translates in real footsteps, adapting to the way you're using your voice to create the sort of footsteps. So it's for me it's a totally different way of thinking to create something apart from using prompts. So I think what you're referring to, Ivo, some stuff is really not hitting on the right point. Like as you say, the recording session are most of the time the most interesting things, because people can be creative, the performing musicians, and they can offer you all kind of variations that you haven't thought of. But this also really opened my eyes. So you can also directly do something emotionally creative with your voice, for example, which is translated in this case, footsteps.
Yeah.
So these are also interesting possibilities. Are there any more threats for us as media composers, or just apart from the energy stuff that we discussed, disappearing of library music? Is it just positive? And I also think about education, for example, because I can imagine that it also has consequences for using this kind of examples that you just discussed, that it also has consequences for education. How to train yourself as a composer, that it also will become have more possibilities, or that it also have its consequences for education. But are there any more threats for media composers, or is it just a rather positive? And I'm asking more questions than just one. The author rights thing, of course, because if you create music through prompts or whatever, are you the owner? Is AI the owner? Are you together with AI the owner? Because you can become creative using writing the right prompts or using the right sounds with your mouth, as the example that I told you about. So some more questions I throw in.
Yeah, really good questions. Yeah.
I don't think you would ever be the sole owner. And I don't think AI would be a co-owner. To me, it seems like if you're adding enough of yourself, so if you're creative enough with your prompting, you could be like the co-owner of something that you created with your prompting, and the owners of the original material that the model was trained on. So it's not like a remix because of course there's a much bigger distance, but it's something like a remix where there's like a vast array of music going into the remix, something like that, or am I simplifying it too much now?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's a really complex field, I think. It's a really complex field once you start using it. So,
Hmm.
and a lot of backtracking, right? Like in 4 years, like what happens then? So it's a big unknown.
Yeah.
A
It's
complete
probably like
unknown.
a fine line between using the AI as a tool to help your own creativity, and then crossing over to AI actually doing the creativity.
Right. That's a
And
really
then
good
there's
point. Yeah, I wanted to make that point too. I think the biggest, if you want to put sort of the thread, is I think to lose the fun in composition and media composition. Yeah, there's a clear opportunity to make your media composition pipeline more efficient. Like they're selling it to you, they're selling it to others, tech
yeah,
companies, and at some point there will be a state where there's models like or agents, I think, as Mark
yeah,
Zuckerberg calls them,
yeah,
that will solve these little problems in your studio on their own, right? Like if you want to have a master, you'll have like sort of a mastering agent taking care of this. I could see that in 5 years. There's several services right now or startups that do that independently, but I don't see any reason that in like a few years you could host that locally on your own servers. Like I think there's a natural tendency for someone that owns a recording studio to optimize certain processes in composition, recording, or mastering. And I think in that tendency, there is the threat that you could lose simply the fun of doing that because you've automated it too much. You've automated your work. You've found too many efficient ways of composing and producing that good ideas don't come as natural anymore because you've simply not invested that time anymore in doing production, doing a good mix, and doing a good recording because you've perhaps offloaded it into automating something, or now you're suddenly curating this whole set of machine learning processes that are taking care of it. So that means that you're not investing the time anymore to do it yourself, where that was your passion. So I think that's I think one of the biggest threats, to be honest, is to become too invested in a kind of technologies, like sort of bloat the technology on your laptop and invest more time searching for good plugins rather than, creating just like weird fun shit. So to put it that way. So I think that's one of the biggest ones. And maybe as an industry, even like if you want to zoom out a little bit, like if suddenly some bigger recording or production companies start doing this and start competing with the smaller ones that still want to do, sort of the old school or like the human way of producing, like that's a danger in itself too, if the field becomes too optimized. So if we suddenly can do like vocal recordings for 100 euros instead of 400, well, how do you compete then if you want to do it in a way that is, I think, still more human and more fun, compared to production companies that have suddenly optimized the whole process and can do it for less. So I think that's perhaps one of the biggest dangers if we lean too much towards the optimization as an industry. So, and that's something we have to watch out for. Like, how can we actually break the medium and actually make it sound like, something really cool rather than use it for simply optimizing?
And if I may add, so as we're talking also about the copyright and ownership, there's also a risk when modeling, so making a model for the entirety of the globe, that other cultures are kind of ignored. So regarding ownership, for instance, let's say more traditional music in certain contexts that are not about who owns this music, or maybe it's actually, specifically for that tribe. We Western world have a tradition in kind of stealing art and appropriating it. That's something to be aware of as well. So that regardless of if you say the AI is now the owner or the one that has prompted is the owner, what's the data set actually comprised of, and who's represented, and who's deciding for the end user who should own the copyright. And you see that in many generative AI models, that the common ground is mostly favored toward Western, maybe even American standards. So that's a risk of bias in many dimensions.
That's a very good point, Tan. But I also recognize what Jan is referring to, because I just mentioned the example of using your voice to create footsteps. But in the end, that's kind of ambiguity, because you're very, when we found this plugin, you were very amazed about it, that it was possible. But in the end, we don't use it because I like to do Foley, so I like to make footsteps. Because that's fun to do. Exactly. And I was wondering, because Machielse, I was asking, you did together with Mengelmoes a whole scene from Star Wars, if I'm correct. You create music and sound only through AI.
Yes, we took a scene of a Star Wars movie, and we set ourselves the task to only use AI to do the full post production. So or as many AI as possible. So we generated sound effects with 11 Labs, and we created the soundtrack with, I think, Udio, and we used some mixing plugins to get the mix better. It was like an experiment. How good is it? How good will the sound be? And what was interesting that normally if we do some sound design, we have a big database of sounds, and we just are looking for the right element to we search, and then we put different elements on top of each other. So if we had done that scene with traditional sound design way, we, for example, the spaceship is lifting, then there has to be a lot of different sounds. So the engine of the spaceship, the dust, the debris that are falling, all those layers had to be there. And normally we would compose that together, but now we could just type in what we want to hear. So we generated with 11 Labs sounds that are like layered. So you can describe all those things, and then you hear it all. That was really interesting to experience the way of creating a sound. Goes from searching in the library and picking the right stuff and put it together, by just prompting writing a good prompt and getting the full sound. But yeah, in the end, there were a lot of things that we had to fix or just add another layer. So it was kind of similar process, but it felt also very different. So, and in the end, it was also fun to do, because you had in mind how a spaceship would sound. So we won actually an award for this short scene. So we talked about the community building, and they had a competition. So we saw that as an experiment for us to do, and it was really interesting to put those things together. And I think for example, we had two voice assets we needed. So it was like somebody breathing, very simple, but I thought, okay, I can record it now with my phone in 1 minute, but I decided not to do that and just to prompt breathing. I generated a lot of breath sounds and then put that together. So it was not a really efficient process. Yeah, but it was the goal. So to only use those sound generators.
Yeah, so this was like an experiment, and I think you maybe already a year ago or something, or a couple of
Yeah, I
months.
think half a year ago or something.
Yeah. Do you currently have any favorite AI tools or techniques that you use and that you feel are really an addition to your workflow and your creative process?
Yeah, I use a lot of Suno and Udio actually, but not in the way that most people use it, I think, because, well, it depends a little bit on what kind of composer you are. So there are composers that are just writing notes and working with MIDI. I am more interested in also like having sound elements, put it into the sampler, do something with it, with sound, reverse it, all kinds of effects on the sound. I'm more like a puzzling composer. And it's really fun to have AI with me to get those puzzle pieces. So I generate, for example, just a track in Udio, and then with some acapellas or some acapella vocals, or just a pop track with some low noisy voice, and then I isolate that voice, chop the few parts, put it in the sampler. Yeah, so that's more kind of the way I use it, because it's always like if you generate something, it's sometimes it's for 80%. You think, that's nice, but it's always not perfect. So I try to remove the things that I don't like with stem splitting and stuff, and then or take the one thing that is really nice on that specific generation.
That's like a modern equivalent of the good old crate digging, like
Yeah.
searching for the perfect sound to work with.
Yeah, but I think tools like Splice are also in that area. Like in the traditional way, it was like big folder of samples that you can choose from, and now you can generate your own samples and use that. Yeah, you can generate your own synth sound, and we saw also the synth GPTs where you can prompt your own sound. It's really interesting if you have like something in your mind and you know how to describe it. So you need the knowledge of a synthesizer, like how what is an LFO and how does a filter work, and you need to know those specific things to prompt a good sound. But it's really interesting, and you can also like mimic a sound and put that in a synth plant or something. There's a synth that you can use, and that mimics your sound that you put in, and then it becomes a synthesizer. So, yeah.
So would I be right in saying that your creative process as a whole, like the big picture, isn't radically different, but it's being helped at various stages with AI? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that there are a lot of producers in the studio that we talked about, like creativity and efficiency. But I think there is always a part of the creative process that can be more efficient, and there is a process that has to be creative. So if we record a vocalist and we use the vocal and we build a track around it, and we are thinking, okay, we need actually more backing vocals with her voice, but we have there's no budget to hire her anymore, or we can make an assignment with her that we clone her voice and make backing vocals with her voice. Yeah, that can be a win-win situation. Yeah, I see a lot of possibilities in the studio, and if you know how to make music, if you studied music, you have the knowledge of how to write, how harmony works, and how you make a good track. I think those knowledge is really helpful, and you can make better prompts if you know how to write music. It's also if you use AI, very important to know how it works.
Okay. Any final remarks? I have the idea that we more or less have touched everything, all the topics at this moment. Okay, if not, then I would like to thank you all and for all your contributions, and maybe we can do it again this session in 1 or 2 years. We probably totally new insights, maybe not, I don't know, we don't know, new experiences. But for now, many thanks and a happy and good, healthy 2025.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.